Today, we're talking about podcasts and how you can create one. This show is for everyone working at the Coalface. Digital, business, marketing, social. This is At the Coalface with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello everybody, welcome to episode 48 of At the Coalface. Going back to a bit of more of the normal episode that we normally have on At the Coalface after 2 episodes of interviews with Christian Holst from Baymard and also Justin Dry from Vino Mofo. So super exciting to do those interviews. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed them and got a lot out of them. Looking to line up a whole lot more interviews for 2017 with some interesting people. Nick Molnar from Afterpay, and a whole range of other guests. So it's my goal to obviously bring you as much value as I can and as much interesting content as I can. And I realize that as much as I like pontificating and as much as hopefully you like hearing from me, obviously bringing in other viewpoints, other contextual views, other bits of knowledge from other people and from their perspectives, hopefully adds an additional layer of value for you. Also, this is the first episode, a whole episode of changes, I guess. This is the first episode that I'm shooting with the new Canon M3, the EOS M3 camera that I bought specifically for this series and obviously other vlogging that I want to do. So hopefully you found that this one brings a little bit, elevates the video quality. I've always done my shooting historically, well, at least in 2016, I did it all on my iPhone 6s Plus. And whilst the iPhone shoots HD and it's a very, very good camera for what it is, it's still a phone. So we have to be honest of our expectations out of phones. And so I wanted to get a dedicated vlogging camera, and hopefully this one just elevates that audio quality, the video quality, and just everything, just that next level that will hopefully make it easier to watch, listen to, etc. Now, the other thing that I want to bring up is kind of what this episode obviously is about, and give you a bit of an intro. Hopefully you all are well into your new year now. I hope you've had a great holidays. Hope you've had a great break. Hopefully you've come back well rested and well refreshed to hit the ground running in 2017. I know I am. I'm very rested, very well refreshed. I'm looking to absolutely crush it in 2017. Got lots of projects on the go, both with my full-time, I guess, day job as it were, and a whole lot of plans for all of the content that I want to produce for you guys in 2017 as well. So some really, really, truly exciting stuff coming up, and I hope you guys are as pumped about 2017 as I am. Now, what we want to talk about today is podcasting, and specifically what it takes to create a good podcast as of now in 2017. Now, if you want to go check out my Facebook page, my Jason Greenwood Facebook page, I did a Facebook Live video recently about podcasting and how and why you will want to create a podcast in 2017, and I get more into the strategy of it. So the high-level stuff, what are the benefits of doing a podcast, why you would want to do a podcast, and really, I guess, the reasoning behind why you'd want to tap into that podcast audience, and why I believe that podcasts have seen an absolute explosion in popularity over the last 12 to 24 months. And so if you want to go check that video out, it's got some interesting information that I won't repeat here, but you'll hopefully still find it interesting. Now, for the purposes of this episode of At the Coalface, I really want to get more into the nitty-gritty, the actual steps involved in creating a podcast, and also, I guess as of today in 2017, what are the main podcasting engines that you're going to want to get listed in so that you tap the widest audience possible. So let's just dig straight in. So I always try to speak from experience, and I try not to talk about too much stuff that I only know about at a distance, or only have experienced at a distance or at arm's length. So over the break, I created the At the Coalface Podcast, so I have very fresh experience. I've seen this whole process through very fresh eyes because I've just done this for myself and for you guys as an audience. So I can kind of step you through it. It's very fresh in my mind. I know exactly what's involved. I know the sort of the complexities and the things you need to do to get this thing off the ground. So what I chose to do, and what other podcasters choose to do also, is to take their video content, which is what I do here for my main episodes of At the Coalface, and strip out the MP3 audio, so the audio only component of that, to create the podcast on the back of. And that's what I've done as well. Some podcasts are dedicated audio only podcasts. Some of them are video that has then been converted into audio for the podcast portion. So, which is what I've done. So I had my MP4 files from Camtasia, which is what I do all my post-production editing in for At the Coalface, the video version. And so the first thing that you need to do, or the two main components that you need to have for a podcast, are MP3 files for the audio component, and then you also need to have a RSS feed. So really simple syndication, rich site snippets, I forget exactly what the RSS definition is. Really simple syndication is kind of a slang term for it. But basically all it is a feed of updates that gets pushed out from your podcast host so that podcasting engines can index that fresh content as it's loaded. And so you need those two things. You need the MP3 files and you need the RSS feed. Now, fortunately, there are dedicated podcasting hosts that make generating that RSS feed very, very simple. So these dedicated hosts, they host your MP3 files of your podcast. They give you a nice web interface in most instances to upload your podcast files to. Often they'll also provide an FTP upload option so that you can upload in bulk. Makes it really, really easy to manage that upload process. And so I've chosen Podbean. Now there's a whole raft of podcast hosting providers out there. Some of them provide bigger storage, some of them provide more bandwidth, some of them provide cheaper pricing. So there's a whole raft of providers out there. Now because I converted all the previous 47 episodes into podcast files, MP3 files, I needed to go with a host already that could host large numbers of files, wouldn't charge the earth for it. I think it worked out to be about 160 bucks New Zealand dollars for an entire year of hosting, and that's unlimited bandwidth and unlimited file size hosting. So, pretty good deal, not that expensive, and realistically, to pay 160 bucks a year to have your files hosted and RSS feed provided to all the podcast engines, pretty realistic price. Now, the thing about Podbean is that there's a few limitations. That you cannot edit the meta tags for your MP3 files in bulk through their web interface. You also can't set up default upload and meta tag pre-settings that are a template that get applied to all of your files that get uploaded. And so there's a few other little things that Podbean don't do, but they do provide podcast analytics so that you can see all of the data across the downloads, where those files are going to, what countries, which files are the most popular, essentially which episodes are the most popular. So they do provide a very good service for what it is. And realistically, I looked at SoundCloud and I looked at a few other dedicated podcast providers, and for me, Podbean was great. So you really need a hosting provider, you need those MP3 files, and you need the RSS feed, which your podcasting or pod hosting provider will provide for you. So one of the first things you need to do is, if you're not generating MP3 files natively, then you need to strip out, or you need to separate out your MP4 files or your MP3 files from your MP4 files. So convert your MP4 file into an audio-only MP3 file. Now, I use a tool called Any Video Converter, and it will take almost any format of video or audio and convert it to almost any format of video or audio. So obviously video to video is required, but if you need to convert video to audio, then they can effectively take out the video component, strip out the video, and generate just the audio file for you. So that's really easy. I did it in bulk so I could do all of the 47 episodes at once, just add them all to the tool, click convert, and it spit it all out as MP3 files. Now the next thing you're going to need to do in terms of steps is you're going to need to add meta tags to these MP3 files. Now meta tags are hidden tags, they're hidden bits of information stored against the file that allow the podcast engines or the podcast managers like iTunes to index those files completely for search and find capability on those engines. So they allow you to add, who the author is, i.e. me in my case. They allow you to state the podcast name. They allow you to state what type of podcast is or what kind of file it is. Whether it's a podcast or whether it's whether it's some other form, whether it's let's say hypothetically it was a keynote speech, or there was various other types of files that you wanted to upload to the system. Then you would be able to choose which files, the file types those are. You're able to put copyright information and a whole bunch of other information in those meta tags. Now, because my stripped out MP3 files didn't have any of those fields attached to them and ready to go, and I wanted to be able to edit them in bulk, in mass, I needed a tool to do that, and I used MP3 Tag, and that's a Windows program. It's free of charge, no extra cost. Just download it, use it, and it allows you to set up presets. So what I did is I just loaded all of those 47 files into the tool. I was able to bulk select them, and I was able to preset a whole bunch of the fields that weren't going to change to be consistent, and save those all in bulk. And then I went one by one and just put in the title of the actual podcast episode and some of the other, and the podcast episode number, i.e. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I was able to do that on a podcast episode by episode basis just by scrolling through each individual file. It's got a 2-pane system. The file's on the right and the meta tags are on the left, and you're able to just fill those in, hit save, and it'll save those against the files. Once I had added all of the meta tags that were required, I was then ready to upload those to Podbean so that they could be hosted by Podbean. Now, because I was doing more than one file, I was doing 47 of them, they provide the functionality to be able to upload via FTP client. So FTP program on a Windows FTP program, I just connected to their FTP server, and boom, I uploaded them all in one huge giant block. Now, generally, if you're only producing one podcast episode at a time, their web interface is just fine. You just browse for the file, upload it, and then once it's uploaded, then you do still have to go one by one in those files. And that's another thing, unfortunately, that Podbean doesn't do. It doesn't bring in all of the metadata information that you've already stored against that file into their web interface. It just doesn't parse that information in any way and pre-populate any of those metadata fields within Podbean. And I think that's one of the drawbacks of Podbean. I don't know if any of the other podcast hosts do that, where they pre-parse and pre-populate as many fields as possible. But I had to, once again, just go one by one through each of those files, and I had to put in the title, and that was pretty much about it. That was the only requirement in Podbean against each episode. So it's just a little bit of time to do that 47 times again. But I mean, if you're doing one at a time and just loading it through the web interface, then it's not really an onerous task. Once that was done, then Podbean provides you the URL. It's just a web URL for the RSS feed that they generate for you. Now, one little hiccup, and you'll need to watch this regardless of your podcast host, is that by default, Podbean limits your feed to 20 episodes or 20 files. And so it only went back from 47 down to 27. And so that was a problem for me because I wanted all of the files to be loaded there. So I had to go in and I had to tweak that setting after talking to customer service because I didn't even know that setting existed. There's quite a few settings in the web interface to change. And so once I set that, then the feed was all good to go, and it was all 47 episodes were available in the feed. So once that was all ready to go, and I confirmed that that was ready to go, then I took that URL that they provided and I loaded that into iTunes Podcasts. So once you've got an iTunes account, then or an Apple ID, basically controls everything to do with Apple, then you are able to log into their Podcasts Connect website, and you're able to give them that RSS feed URL, and then they go ahead and index that. Now, I think it took about 3 or 4 days from memory. It was about 4 days actually, and they sent me an email once it was all indexed and ready to go and available. And then once they gave me the notification, within a couple hours of that notification, I did a search for At the Coalface, and in fact, a search for my name within iTunes Podcasts, and both were found straight away. So fantastic. You'll also want to list, on other very popular podcast engines or podcast directories like iTunes. There's other ones out there. There's Blueberry. There's Stitcher. There's a whole raft of them out there. If you just do a quick Google search for podcast directories or popular podcast directories, there's Miro. And you'll come up with a whole list of them, and the process is very, very similar to iTunes. So in iTunes, you have to load your cover art or the logo, as it were, for your podcast. You have to give the name, you have to give the publisher, you have to give the RSS feed URL. There's a few different fields that you have to fill out, and that's similar or true amongst all of the other podcast directories on the market that I submitted to anyway. And it takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours for those guys to generally get back to you via email and confirm that you're now live in their system so that you can access the biggest audience possible with your podcast. So all said and done, realistically, it probably took me maybe 4 to 5 hours all up from beginning to end, including converting all those files, meta tagging them, getting them uploaded, getting them titled, getting them organized properly, setting up the hosting with Podbean. So basically you just sign up as a customer, put in your credit card details, they create an account for you. It's all web-based, so really, really easy to do via a web browser. So, I think that, it might have even been less. It might have only been 3 to 4 hours worth of work all up. So realistically, to go from whoa to go on a podcast, I had to create a basic logo and some simple stuff like that. But realistically, it's not an onerous exercise to get a podcast up and running. There's a little bit of money involved for your host of your MP3 files. But other than that, iTunes doesn't charge you anything for podcasts to be listed in their directory. Neither do any of the other podcast directories. They want quality content. They want steady, fresh content. That's what you provide to them, and they provide directory services to you. So it's kind of a quid pro quo there. So realistically, at the end of the day, pretty simple process, pretty easy to do. Hopefully you guys will go and watch my Facebook video on, I guess, the strategic reasoning of why you'd want to have a podcast. But really, as of 2017, as of this first part of 2017 here, podcasting and getting up and running on a podcast is actually very easy. It used to be much harder, when you had to either host the files yourself and generate an RSS feed yourself, and set up web servers and all the rest. That was definitely a much harder exercise. Now that there are a lot of dedicated podcast hosts out there that provide all of the essential services that a podcaster might need, it has made the process a heck of a lot easier. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you've got an interest, if you've got a passion, if you've got something that you want to share with the world, and everybody should, everybody's got something unique that they should be sharing with the world and to hopefully make the world a better place. So get out there, mix it up, make the effort. Most of these podcast hosts, they've got trial, options with their services. You can give it a go. Create one episode, even if it's just on a little handheld digital recorder that records directly to MP3, or do it on a microphone directly to your computer with a mixing deck like Audacity or something like that. There's many different ways to get up and running, even if you're not creating videos like I do. So give it a go. Let me know your experiences. If you've done a podcast, or if you already have a podcast, let me know how you did it. Let me know who you're hosted with, and let me know what kind of, response you've gotten from your podcast. Wish you guys all the best. Look forward to 2017. Look forward to hanging with you and bringing you all the best information that I possibly can. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks.